This video will show you how to create session settings from the VERDE VDI Management Console. I am logged in using Google Chrome. VERDE uses a configuration called Session Settings to manage the virtual desktop environment related to system resources like RAM and virtual processors, networking, security settings, access to peripherals, USB support, and also integration to Active Directory, to mention a few. In this video, I will go through the steps to create a session setting. So from the VERDE Management Console, I'm going to hover over Configuration tab and then scroll down to Session Settings. And from this screen, you can see that I already have created several session settings. You can create different session settings for various groups of users and apply them to the same gold image. This gives you the flexibility to assign different system resources or change security settings or allow or deny USB devices for various groups while using the same gold image. I will show you how to do this in the video. From the session settings screen, we can start off by clicking on the Create New button. You will be prompted to enter a name for your session setting. I will use New Set. You will want to create a name that distinguishes it from other session settings. Best practice is to enter all lowercase letters and numbers with no embedded spaces or special characters. The underscore character is the exception and is allowed. The next field is the description field, and it's completely optional. I will leave the type field as the default of VDI. I will explain remote access in another video. From here, we will have several tabs that define aspects of a virtual desktop experience. The default tab is the System tab. Here you can specify how much RAM the virtual session will have. For example, in Windows 10 Virtual Desktop, it is best to assign 4 GB or 4096 megabytes. In my example, I will leave the RAM set to 2 GB or 2048 megabytes. Note, the RAM that is assigned to each virtual session is dedicated memory on the VERDE VDI server, meaning that the VERDE server must have enough RAM to host the Linux operating system, the VERDE VDI application, and all of the RAM that has been assigned to all of the virtual sessions. Max size for user image in gigabyte is how large the user area will be for storing desktop settings and documents. Non-persistent user image is blank by default. This will make the user image persistent, maintaining their desktop customizations and their documents. If you click on this, VERDE will not maintain any personal settings or documents after the desktop is shut down. This is ideal for setting up employee training desktops or for a student lab where you would not want to maintain anything from the previous virtual session. Virtual CPUs allows you to specify the processor level of the virtual desktop. I will leave the default of 2 virtual CPUs. This would be for a light-duty task worker use case. This setting works well with Windows 10, running Microsoft Office 365, and occasional web browser applications. If you plan to install more applications for them to use, it is best to select 4 vCPUs. Time between update ready notifications in minutes defaults to 1 minute. This is the time interval that VERDE uses to send a notification to all active sessions that the gold image has been updated, and explains that the user would need to shut down their session and restart it to see the new changes. Changing this to -1 would disable the notifications. Idle session shutdown timeout in seconds. Controls whether VERDE will automatically perform a shutdown of the virtual session after the specified number of seconds of inactivity. The default is -1, which disables the automatic shutdown. Maximum amount of time to wait for a session to shut down before aborting in seconds is the time that VERDE waits for an orderly shutdown of the session. The default time is 90 seconds, and you can change this to more or less. After the seconds has elapsed, VERDE will abort the active session. Secure boot. This defaults to no or off and can be selected by clicking in the box if secure boot is required. Processor type. I will take the default of host for this setting. This works for most server hardware. If needed, you can select various host emulations to better match your VERDE server hardware. I will move on to the Network tab. This allows you to specify which IP subnet the virtual session will be started. NAT uses the private IP subnet that is managed by the DHCP service running in the VERDE server. The other option is bridged and would require a DHCP server within the company environment to assign a company IP address. This option will require the name of the bridge interface that the VERDE server is connected to the company network. The other settings in this tab will be covered in a separate video. The Security tab allows you to either allow or disable the use of printing, file sharing, and clipboard between the virtual session and the endpoint device like a PC or a laptop. The default is to allow the sharing of these resources. In a highly secured environment, you can prevent data leakage by unchecking printing and file sharing and by disabling the clipboard function. The other notable setting to enhance security is to enable Hide Client Connection Bar. Within a virtual desktop, a connection bar floats at the top of the screen and allows the user to click on it to disconnect their virtual session. I'll start my session. Windows with Office 365. So there's my virtual session, and here is the connection bar that I talked about. If you want to disable it, it will hide this and the user won't see this. And if you hide it, this bar in their virtual session, it will enhance security. They won't be able to do a disconnect, which is by clicking the X. VDI Watermark allows you to enter an optional text phrase that will be superimposed onto the virtual desktop. The next tab is Protocol tab and is straightforward. You can allow or deny RDP or SPICE for virtual Windows sessions. SPICE is required for Linux, and RDP is recommended for Windows desktops. The USB tab allows you to accept or deny USB attached devices. If you take the defaults, it will not allow any USB devices to be used within the virtual desktop. If you click on USB peripheral support, it will allow the use of all USB devices. Some external devices may require you to enter the VID PID of the USB device, things like scanners, barcode printers, etc. You can also restrict what USB devices are allowed by entering the VID PID of specific external devices, and only those devices with that signature can be used. The Active Directory tab, I won't go into detail on this today since this is covered in a completely separate video. Most of the advanced tab settings are covered in a more advanced training. There are a couple of settings that relate to the Linux virtual desktop. The first one is Enable Single Sign-On in the guest image. This will pass through the logon credentials that are entered into the VERDE client while connecting to the Linux guest and use the logon credentials to perform single sign-on. Automatically create a local user in the Linux guest is enabled always and will add a Linux user account to the virtual desktop using the logon credentials. So the last step would be to click Save and Close to complete the creation of the session settings. You can edit an existing session setting and perform the same Save Close function after making changes to a session setting. The last thing I will show you is where you specify which session setting will be assigned. This is configured in the desktop policy section. So once again, I'll hover over configuration, scroll down to desktop policy. On this screen, you will see several rules that provision one or more virtual desktops to individual users or to groups of users. You can see where the gold image is assigned in this column, and over to the right you will see where the session settings is specified. If I click on Edit to edit this rule, this will allow me to assign session settings. So if I click on the drop down and scroll down to the session setting that I just built, new set, I can assign it and just click Update and close. This concludes this video, how to create session settings in VERDE VDI.